You see it pop up momentarily.
I don't know what I see, but I don't see anything, but you just let me know.
Okay, you can go ahead.
All right, well, welcome everyone to the May 20th Infrastructure and Engineering Subcommittee meeting of the PAC. I'm Barb Olson, I'm one of the co-chairs, and I'm going to read the announcement. Members of the board may participate remotely by telephone or other electronic means due to the local public health emergency novel I can never say that, coronavirus pandemic. This was declared on March 16th, 2020, pursuant to the provisions of Minnesota Statute Section 13D.021. I just want to reiterate, the last time we had an INE meeting, we talked a little bit about hand raising and also about keeping our comments one at a time. And if you have a comment, then you have to get back in the line. And so we've got a lot to cover tonight, and this helps us get through more efficiently. So I appreciate your support and encouragement and ability to help with this. So,
Barb, I may also note, I may jump in and interrupt after about 10 minutes of presentation for each one.
okay.
Just so we have enough time for discussion as well. So.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Appreciate that. So why don't we get started? Millicent, you take the roll call so we don't have to do anything, right?
That's correct.
Okay. We're going to start with the near north side safe routes to school. It's at 30% with Forrest Hardy and Nathan Kemmer from Minneapolis Public Works. Welcome.
Thanks, Barb. Y'all let me know if my sound isn't working. It's been spotty lately, so.
Okay.
Let me go ahead and share my screen. So I'm presenting on the Near North Safe Routes to School project on 16th Avenue North from Queen to Aldrich. Myself, I'm transportation planner at the city of Minneapolis. Nathan Kemmer is our project engineer. We also have Zan Associates on board doing some outreach and engagement, and Tool Design Group is helping us out with some supporting roles and graphics. Project goals are to improve the safety of the most vulnerable users, including cyclists and pedestrians, and our students at several different schools on the corridor. We're connecting 3 schools and 3 parks with this project across a couple of major streets. We're also addressing safety on a documented pedestrian crash concentration corridor, and we're fulfilling city transportation goals. So why 16th Avenue? It's a safe route. It's several youth-oriented destinations along that route. It's a pedestrian crash concentration corridor, and speeding is a documented issue on the residential street. It's also a designated all ages and abilities bikeway. This map is showing the safe routes, including 16th Avenue North in the area, and connecting the schools, North High, Hall, and Franklin Middle. You can see from the pedestrian crash concentration map, 16th Avenue near Penn is part of the ped crash corridor. And all ages and abilities bikeway map, 16th Ave between Penn and Lindell is indicated on that map. Looking at the crash data that's available from 2011 to 15, we had 4 pedestrian crashes, 1 bicycle crash, and 47 motor vehicle crashes in that time period. Looking at speeds and volumes, from Logan to Knox near North Commons Park, we had a 85th percentile speed of 31 miles an hour. So that's pretty fast, especially for a residential street. That's more like you would see on a busy street like Penn or Emerson Fremont, but we're getting those speeds on a residential street. The volumes are maybe a little bit high for a residential street, but not anything out of the ordinary for a bike boulevard. About 980 vehicles per day between Logan and Knox. So some of the treatments that we're using to slow down this traffic in this project would be mini traffic circles. That's a kind of a go-to tool that we use in the toolbox to slow down traffic at intersections, especially on bike boulevards. And raised crossings, we don't have many of them in the city. Here's one of them at 18th Avenue Trail in Northeast Minneapolis. But we'll be implementing a few of these along the corridor, especially where students are crossing between the schools and parks. And here's our master plan. This is what we have for our 30% layout, showing our treatments at each intersection. And our density of treatments is pretty high. Normally on Bike Boulevard, we might have a few streets with gaps without any improvements, but we have pretty much an improvement at almost nearly every intersection on this project. And that's just to help slow down the traffic that we see on 16th. So starting from west to east, Queen Avenue North is a connection point with the Queen Avenue Bike Boulevard. There'll be improvements there as part of that project, but we look at maybe updating the ped ramps there at that intersection. Penn Avenue was already reconstructed, so it's already improved with curb extensions. At Oliver and Newton, where traffic is coming into the neighborhood from the west, we have many traffic circles at that location to slow down traffic and kind of a gateway effect. And then near the North Commons Park, on either side of the park at Morgan and James, we have raised crossings to slow down traffic at the crossing where the students are crossing from North High to North Commons. They utilize the ball fields at North Commons for some of their after-school practices and that kind of thing. And then south of the park, we have some speed humps, kind of a tried and true method of slowing down traffic there. Further to the east, at Irving and Girard, we have mini traffic circles, providing that same kind of gateway effect for traffic coming to the neighborhood from the east. And then we have a stormwater planter mid-block that's kind of constricts down the road, kind of like a choke point, which will have another traffic calming effect there. Then at the busy street, Fremont Avenue, we have a flashing beacon to help students cross that that major street with a active device there. Further to the east at Emerson, there's a traffic signal already there. We're not doing any work with this project, but it will be upgraded this year, I believe, as part of the traffic Hsip project. And then moving to the area of the neighborhood east of Emerson, it's kind of its own little pocket of schools and parks over there. We have a traffic circle at DuPont and then raised crossings between Elizabeth Hall and Franklin Middle School at Bryant and Aldrich. So that's the treatment plan. I do have some details of a couple of these intersections to show you, but I'll stop here for see if there's any questions on the treatments themselves. If you think any questions, we can hold them to the end. But I have here a more of a detailed blow up of one of the intersections with a mini traffic circle. Our design vehicle we're using is kind of a delivery van. And so that should allow for a tight radius and a slower traffic moving through that intersection. As you can see here, we're updating the ped ramps as well, where those are out of date. And you see the Bike Boulevard stencils that we'll be placing along the route as well. And then here at Morgan Avenue, at the edge of the park, there's a raised crossing, and we would likely do curb extensions to really choke down the street and emphasize that raised crossing. And here you see that as well with the delivery van design vehicle. So a couple of engagement events we have coming up. We just had the open house last night. And then we have a meeting with the Lopit cyclists, there's a student cyclist group. And then some North High students, after school students that we'll be meeting with in the near future. And Zan Associates is running that engagement for us. And then later this summer, we expect layout approval actually in July of this year. And then we'll be wrapping up with engineering later on this year and into next year. And then construction is summer of next year, 2022. So that's my presentation. I'll take any questions that you guys have.
I have a general question, not specifically about this project, but maybe you can tell us for this project. Do you have a budget now for this, or does that evolve when the engineering drafting and specific designs are done? Or are you locked in with a budget now before citizen feedback, or does that happen afterwards? Can you talk a little bit about the funding and when it's locked in on a project like this that's got a lot of pieces to it?
Yeah, certainly. So this project was awarded some federal funding back in 2018 is when we applied for that funding. And that kind of locked in the budget at that point in time. And from there, planning the treatments is a little bit of a moving target, just trying to get them calibrated right so it meets within the budget. But yeah, the budget is usually set well before the project is going into engineering design.
And so if you get a lot of feedback from local residents, what is that? Can that affect in any way? Is there another pot to get a little bit more or something? Or is it's locked in, the amount is, sought, it's awarded, and that's it. And then this goes out to the community, like this is where we anticipate spending our money. That's correct, my assumption?
Yeah, so if there are elements that are above and beyond, what's the scope of this project, that's something that we just say is ultimately out of scope. If there were like certain treatments that we were seeing as a priority and we wanted to invest more in those and take away others in certain areas, that's something we could do within the project scope. But usually if somebody wanted a full greenway block and a complete trail or something within a block of this project, that would be maybe considered out of scope because it would eat up all of the budget.
Yeah, thanks for that. It seems like from a financial point of view, all these projects are done before anybody's talked to outside of the city. Before the residents are talked to, before we're talked to, and that actually is of more import sometimes than coming in at 30%, because it is the scope. Yeah, I mean, you're right. How much is the budget for this?
I want to say it's about 1.5 million, but I could be a little out there.
Sure. Well, I've asked some follow-up questions, and I apologize. I've already run afoul of the request. So thank you. I've just always been curious about that. So thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions for Forrest? Matt? Looks like Matt has his hand up.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. I believe when you were here before, you had talked about a diversion around North Commons and North High School. I was just wondering what the conversation was deciding not to do that.
Yeah, great question. There's several reasons that we kind of steered away from that. One being that the volumes are well within what we consider suitable for a bike boulevard, under 1,000 a day or 1,500 a day. So it's not that we're trying to treat for volume control, which is one reason we would do diversion, but also just there are a lot of other areas in this neighborhood that kind of block off the access. So North Commons Park, you know, is a 3-block stretch from north to south that blocks off access. And then North High School is 2 blocks to the south there. So this is one of the main routes through the neighborhood. There's also a lot of one-way streets in the area that also limit access. So we just heard from a lot of people that vehicle access would be detrimented by instituting something like that at that location.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Forrest at this time? Okay. Are you looking for something from us, Forrest? Do you need a resolution?
Sure, this project's at 30%, so a resolution would be good at this
Would
time.
be great. Okay.
I will work on putting something together and I'll share it out with the executive committee.
Okay. Thanks, Aaron. All right. Thank you, Forrest. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now we're going to move to Matthew and the 2022 Hennepin County HSIP Safety Project.
Yes, I'm going to introduce this project. I guess on behalf of the county, I took over as a point person when Abdullahi left the city to go work for MnDOT. So I'm teaming up with Hennepin County staff, Olagoke Afalabi and Kelly Augusto, who's also on the call. And they are going to share a drawing. So there's 5 different intersections. I guess we would look for a resolution today because it's in that 15 to 30% range, probably just shy of 30%. But with that, I'll turn it over to Olagoke.
Thank you, Matthew. All right, just give me one quick second here. Okay. So as Matthew mentioned earlier, this is a 2022 Hsip project in the city of Minneapolis, and it's an intersection project. 5 total intersections, one of them at Cedar and Lake Street, and 4 intersections at 4 intersections along 42nd Street. Currently, we are at, as Matthew mentioned, kind of at a between preliminary stages and 30%. And the plan is to get municipal consents for the layouts by June. We had an engagement yesterday, an open house engagement with the public to get to introduce the project to them as well as get feedback. So I'm just gonna quickly go through the improvements at all 5 intersections. So the first one you see here is Cedar and Lake Street. Currently, this intersection has 3 curb extensions as of today. The Hsip will be adding a 4th curb extension on the southwest corner to further reduce crossing distance. Also, we will be upgrading the ped ramps for better accessibility, as well as adding push buttons at all quadrants for with audible capabilities for especially visually impaired users. And then moving on to the next one, this is one of the 4 intersections along 42nd Street, and this is the first one that we're looking at here. So currently this roadway is a 2-way undivided roadway. And when we met with the public back in 2019, the biggest concern that we received was left-turning vehicles colliding with pedestrians and bicyclists. So to address that, we added a dedicated left turn lane. As of today, there are no dedicated left turn lanes at this intersection. So to reduce that conflict, we added a dedicated left turn lane, which we would also be incorporating with the signal system. So we'll be upgrading the signal system to further protect pedestrians with the use of the dedicated left turn lanes here. Additionally, we are having curb extensions at all 4 corners to further reduce the crossing distance for pedestrians, as well as having a bike bend out for a protected intersection for bicyclists using the intersection. I guess the overall goal of this project is to make sure that we make all intersections safe for all users, bicyclists, pedestrians, people rolling, as well as people on transit, and drivers as well. And then added to that, all corners of this intersection will be getting upgraded for the all the ramps will be getting upgraded to meet ADA standards. We'll also be adding push buttons at all 4 corners here. The next 3 intersections are unsignalized intersections, so those don't get any push buttons, but we are proposing other safety alternatives at this intersection. And at 42nd and 21st, we are proposing a median through the intersection. One of the major concerns we also got from the public back in 2019 was drivers making left turn lanes, making left turn movements, conflicting with pedestrians and bicyclists, as well as drivers bypassing vehicles waiting to make a left turn lane, utilizing the bike lane to go around. So currently, the intersection, as the way the intersection is today, there are 32 conflict points. So that's 32 points where there could be a potential crash. With the median going through the intersection, that reduces it to 4. So only right turning movement. So which we thought was a major safety improvement to eliminate those conflict points. And the median will also be wide enough to allow for a median refuge for pedestrians to wait, which in turn eliminates the need to cross 2 travel lanes at once. So they only have to cross 1 travel lane at once and be able to wait in the median refuge. Also, all paved ramps will be upgraded to meet ADA standards with the project. We'll also be properly restriping and rededicating the bike lanes through the intersection. Additionally, 21st Avenue is a bike boulevard, so we are making sure to keep the access for bicyclists on the 21st to cross 42nd Street. So the bikes will be having a bike cut through in the median right here to allow for them to go through the intersection. So they won't have to, bicyclists don't have to interact with pedestrians while utilizing the median to cross. The next intersection is 42nd and 26th Street. This one has the exact similar approach with 42nd and 21st. So nothing different here. Same idea, same concept, same improvement, same potential result for the other intersection. The only thing with this one is there really isn't a bike cut through going in for this intersection, but there will still be median refuge for pedestrians to use when crossing. And the final intersection is 42nd Street and Nokomis. This intersection currently has a 4-way stop sign. And back in 2019, residents expressed their desire to keep that 4-way stop control at this intersection. With that would having the 4-way stop there will still create some safety benefits, which will allow drivers to stop and look out for pedestrians before they proceed through the intersection. But added to that, we'll be including medians to also create a refuge for pedestrians to cross the intersection. I would also like to mention that the addition of the medians through the 3 intersections along 42nd also serve as a traffic calming measure. And the lanes will also be slightly narrower than it is today. So that creates that sense of illusion for drivers to slow down as they approach the intersection. And all of these intersections will also be getting proper signage, proper crossing signage, proper pedestrian signage at the medians and on the sidewalks to properly alert drivers as they go through the intersection. And that completes my presentation, and I will open it up for questions and answers. Yes, Aaron.
As we write a resolution, are there any aspects of this that you're looking for particular feedback on, or are you kind of at a point where you're looking for a resolution of generic support?
What are your thoughts, Matthew?
I'd say start with the generic, and if you have specifics, add them. That'd be my thought.
Thanks.
Yes, Peter?
Thanks. Yeah, to that point of, is there much parking being affected at these really sharp looking intersections? Is there any of that kind of would we anticipate objections, changes, and things that we should speak to in the resolution about parking being, parking being lost?
I don't know if I got your question. I don't know if that was a question or if that was a question for me.
Is there park? Yeah, I'm sorry. Is there parking being removed as part at any of these intersections, or to what degree?
Oh, I see. Yeah, there is the potential for parking, and as we go through the design process, we plan to engage with residents or business owners that utilizes this parking to make sure that they're aware this is coming out. At the same time, we'll also be working with the city of Minneapolis with these parkings as well. Matthew, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that.
I'll add that, the one we're looking at is a good example. So the parking impact will be where you see the median plus the taper, sort of the two yellow lines go and end up meeting together. That's about where, the taper. So there will be some parking impact there because we're planning on carrying the bike lane through there as well. So yeah, there's a little bit of an impact.
I just speak to that for the resolution, is that we
Yep.
Endorse that approach.
Appreciate that.
Any other questions from anyone else?
I am a little curious about the lake and Cedar. And if you already answered this, I apologize, but that's an intersection I walk fairly frequently, and it seems like the improvements are minimal there. Cedar's over and over just such a dangerous street. Is there any flexibility that's being built into this, assuming that at some point we won't be okay with 5-lane speeding highways through our densest areas? Or what are you doing maybe that's innovative, knowing the restrictions that exist currently?
We have been getting comments about Cedar being that wide, and we will take those comments back in and discuss with the design staff as well as our traffic staff to see what options we have here, if there is a possibility of creating a bump out. But we really didn't look at that when we were putting this layout together. But now that we've been constantly getting comments about Cedar being too wide, we'll take that back in and discuss that internally and see what options we have.
Excellent. I'm also wondering about the eastbound 21. I feel like when I take that and a light at Cedar, the bus is a bit of protection when the light changes and it's still there, because drivers can't turn right. And that's often sort of that dangerous movement, is the right turning drivers on red. Is there anything that might be able to happen there so that the bus could stop, do an inline stop, like by pulling the bump out further back?
Which are you talking about, this intersection or
I
this
can't
one?
see if you're sorry, I'm just on the phone here, but I'm looking at the layout on my computer screen, and might try and get onto the next call. But it's basically the southwest corner, the north side of that block, where there's a bump out into Lake Street. So the eastbound 21 right now stops. It feels like an inline stop. Like it feels like it prevents drivers from doing an immediate right turn without looking. They're only looking left for Cedar when I have a green to cross Lake Street. And right now the bus feels like a protection there. And I'm wondering if there's a way of keeping it so that it feels like an inline bus stop, or if that's how it'll be set up.
So I should mention that there is a B-line, a Metro Transit project along Lake Street, and they're reconsidering what options they have in terms of the location of the bus stations at this intersection. That hasn't been finalized yet, but that's a comment that I can take back to Metro Transit as we coordinate with them at this intersection. So if I'm understanding your question very well, you are looking to make sure that the bus can stay in the through lane to prevent drivers from trying to make a right turn. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah. Yep, and also because, there's other reasons I support that, but yes, in this case, yes. Thank you. And I had completely blanked on the beeline thing, so I appreciate that reminder.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Any other question, Barb?
I didn't have a question. I just have a comment. I really like, I live very close to the Nokomis and 42nd Street, and we use that all the time, walking and driving. And it's such a high, people go really fast on 42nd. It's helped that the lanes have been narrowed, but especially you're only about 3 blocks from the intersection of Hiawatha and 42nd, which is a really busy and kind of awkward intersection because 34th Avenue comes into a couple blocks past Nokomis. So I like the fact that you're really slowing traffic down and narrowing those lanes. I hope the lanes get really narrow because it really slows traffic and it's really dangerous. Any crossing of 42nd in that area is really scary. So I appreciate that.
Thank you for that comment, Barb. Appreciate it.
Yeah, second.
Someone else has their hand up. Can't see the name. Sonia?
Hi, yes, thank you. If you wouldn't mind going back to the Lake and Cedar layout, I just wanted to mention something to add on to what Julia was saying. The current eastbound 21 stop is near side of the intersection, so it's on the southwest quadrant. And it looks like that bump out is long enough to reach the back door of the bus, which is great. And it'll also provide some extra space for amenities like the shelter we have there and widen the par. I just thought I'd add that.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Are there any other questions at this time?
Is it possible to tighten the Lake Street lanes up to be narrower than 12 feet 3 inches and 10 feet 8 inches?
We can take that comments back in and look into that and see what options we have if that's a possibility.
That would be great if we can get down to 10-foot lanes for all of them. I mean, that's still 50 for Cedar, and that's a huge crossing distance, but that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, and in terms of lane width, typically the county tries to not go lower than 11 foot, but sometimes we have certain scenarios where we could go slightly lower than that. And some of these dimensions you see here, especially the 12 foot lanes, those aren't the actual travel lanes. Sometimes those include the curb pans added to that dimension. But in terms of reducing it that lane entirely, we'll definitely take that back in and again see what options we have if that's a possibility.
That's great, and whatever we can do to have your back on that, I think the PAC would support.
Sounds great. Thank you very much. All right.
Okay.
I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Thank you both.
Thanks all.
Now we want to move on to the Franklin Resurfacing Bikeway with Amy Morgan.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Morgan. I'm an associate transportation planner with TPP and Public Works. Let me know when you can see my screen.
You're going.
Can we?
Cool. So I'm here today to talk about the Franklin Avenue resurfacing project that's happening this year. We will be resurfacing between Penn Avenue and Colfax Avenue. And really this resurfacing project provides us an opportunity to reevaluate the striping that's out there today and look to do safety improvements along this corridor. We'll be looking at the striping all the way from Hennepin to Penn for this project. And as I mentioned, this is an opportunity to bring this street more in line with our city policies and goals such as Vision Zero, Complete Streets, and our Transportation Action Plan. Franklin Avenue is a really important east-west neighborhood connection since it is a continuous connection all the way west of Lake of the Isles to Hennepin, connecting both businesses, schools, parks, and residential areas. There's also the connection to the future reconstruction of Franklin Avenue just to the east of here between Hennepin and Lindale. also connecting to the future reconstruction of Hennepin Avenue between Douglas and Lake. This corridor is identified as a bicycle corridor in our transportation action plan as well. Something I will note is not identified as a AAA network. It is identified as a connector route. So back in fall of 2020, we did some initial outreach to the neighborhood and businesses along this corridor. And what we heard during that time were four main themes: the desire for slower vehicle speeds, the need for safer travel. We heard that the existing parking is in really high demand and is very important for both businesses and community members. And we heard that we need to maintain the access for businesses and residents. So taking that, develop these project goals, first and foremost is to improve the safety and predictability of all people, regardless of their travel mode. We'll also be aiming to maintain all existing on-street parking due to the high demand, redistribute the space to help balance the needs of all users, maintain the access and mobility for residents and businesses, and support active transportation options. Currently along Franklin Avenue, this stretch is now a 25-mile-an-hour posted speed limit as of April of last year. We did a speed study back in August of last year, and what we found was that the speeds were significantly higher than what the posted speed limit is, the highest being of the three locations that we got speed data between Girard and Humboldt. We were seeing up to 33 miles per hour in the 85th percentile speeds. So we know from what we've heard from the community members, also what the data is showing, speeds are very high along here, which leads to some safety concerns as well. We also looked at the crash data between 2016 and 2019, a total of 22 reported crashes during that time, over a quarter of which resulted in injury. And so again, from what we're hearing from the community, what we're seeing through the data, there's a lot of speed and safety concerns along this corridor that we're aiming to improve with this project. So along this corridor, there are both opportunity areas and some more challenging zones. Within the opportunity areas, those are places where we have adequate amount of space, curb to curb, to reduce the travel lanes to 10 feet and implement standard on-street bike lanes. For those challenging areas, those are areas where there are there's just more demand for that street space, kind of more uses and a limited amount of space. And so those two areas are highlighted here. Those are areas where we do have existing on-street parking. So between DuPont and Fremont over on the east side of this corridor, and then between Penn and kind of just west of Lake of the Isles there as well. So looking at these two, kind of taking our policy, our technical analysis, and our feedback that we've heard from the neighborhood, we've developed a concept for this project. And kind of given the different characteristics of those two zones, the opportunity areas and the more challenging zones, we're proposing two different types of bike treatments along this corridor. So standard on-street bike lanes in those areas where we have adequate amount of space, and proposing advisory bike lanes in the areas with existing on-street parking. This allows us to maintain the parking for the residents and businesses, but still providing that network continuity for cyclists as well. For those who may not be as familiar with advisory bike lanes, it is a type of shared roadway where you can expect mixing, merging, and yielding. Research shows that this type of bike treatment encourages slower vehicle speeds and reduces crash rates. We are able to maintain that on-street parking where if we had standard lanes, we wouldn't be able to do. This also provides dedicated space for cyclists within the roadway to help provide for that network continuity, but also helping get cyclists off of the sidewalks and improve the pedestrian experience for those who are on the sidewalk. Due to the interest of time, I'm not going to go through every detail of this. If people have questions, we can definitely zoom in and look at it. But it's broken out into 5 different sections. These sections are based on the street width and what type of treatment is there. You'll see in section A, we have advisory bike lanes. Section B is the majority of the corridor where we have standard on-street bike lanes. Section C, again, one of those areas with the existing on-street parking, and we're proposing advisory bike lanes. And then section D and E, the road is a bit wider, so it's a bit different characteristic, proposing standard on-street bike lanes there as well. In terms of timeline and next steps, we've been working through this concept kind of through fall of last year, through the winter, recently going back out to the public with this concept, hoping to finalize the design here shortly, so that we can have a successful implementation this summer. With that, I'll open it up to any questions or comments that people might have. Thanks.
Thanks, Amy.
Yes, Aaron. I think you're muted.
That happens to me all the time. So given that one of the goals of the project is to improve predictability for all users, would there be, I mean, was it considered, and would there be some advantages to doing advisory bike lanes throughout the whole project area and narrowing the street even further so that traffic has to mix and merge and yield throughout the project area, but there's not this change from area to area between the types of bike treatments?
Yeah, we did look at that, and just given the, it's just safer to have the standard lanes for the majority of the corridor, especially as you're getting towards Knox and Logan, as you're coming around that curve here. And if you were to do the advisory bike lanes, there's not really demand for parking as you get further west, and so it wouldn't necessarily feel like you're narrowing the roadway, because it would just feel like a space that's there. And through kind of like our analysis, it just seemed like this was the better, safer option.
I've got a few questions. I don't know if I should wait, Barb, or.
Go ahead, ask a question.
Okay. I just want to bring up the sidewalk gap again, and I don't recall what you said previously you were planning to do, if anything, to allow people to cross when the sidewalk disappears, or to provide any facilities for people sort of stuck in that.
With this project, there's really little to no curb work that's being done. So we won't be adding in any sort of sidewalk infrastructure. In terms of crossing, where that sidewalk ends that you're mentioning is right at a curve. And so that's not something we would recommend putting a crossing at, just kind of given the sight lines of that area. People are able to cross earlier or further east or west there as well. As of now, we're not planning to put any specific marked crosswalks. Unfortunately,
there's no indication though that the sidewalk disappears. And I mean, I grew up in the area, and like I feel like I'm surprised every time and end up having to cross with that blind curve. So is there the possibility of doing a four-way stop at Knox, or just signage to let people know, like, this is your last chance? Dragons are passed here. We've given up on pedestrian infrastructure, or we haven't installed it yet. Like, is there anything so that you're not suddenly like, oh, that's right, this is that street?
That's definitely something I can bring back to our traffic folks and see what they would recommend, if we could include something like that specifically at Knox. I'm not sure where that will go, but I'll definitely bring that back.
I mean, it's not a predictable thing to run out of sidewalk, and it's definitely an area. All the time I see people with their ice cream cones heading to Lake of the Isles, and both of those are on the south side of Franklin, and it's like it comes up repeatedly for especially people who aren't familiar with the area, as well as those of us who don't seem to remember it.
Yeah. And one thing that's outside the scope of this project, but I know there is the Cedar Isles master planning process happening currently, and I think this area, I believe, is encompassed within that too. And so like bringing that point up within that planning process would probably be really valuable as well. Since this is just a resurfacing and there's not any curb work that's happening, that it's just not feasible to do that with the scope of this project. But I think if like just highlighting this, especially for the park board and just kind of some of the other planning efforts that are happening in the area could be very beneficial. Christopher, did you have a question?
I do. I just, at Logan, there's, with the 3 directions of travel, there's 2 stop signs. Eastbound Franklin does not have a stop sign. And I've always sort of wondered why that was. It makes it a little dicey to cross north of the park if you're going to walk up Logan. I'm assuming that not having a stop sign there helps traffic flow east, and therefore people not blocking getting off the parkway onto Franklin. I mean, that's the only thing that I could speculate on. Do you have any insight on that, or is there something? It seems to me that a 3-way stop should go in there, but there might be a reason that I'm not recognizing that it's not feasible.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and something actually I was curious about when I started working on this project. And I found out that the westbound stop sign was actually implemented through essentially just enough community demand for having a stop sign, and that got put in back in, I believe it was in the 80s. And so that was really done through just community push, I guess. And there hasn't been any, I guess, need or foreseen need for a stop sign eastbound here. But again, that's a conversation I can bring up to our traffic folks to reevaluate that.
I honestly thought there was one, Christopher. So thank you for alerting me to that. I thought there were just a lot of jerks coming from that eastbound driving. So
yeah, there's not. And the only thing I think of is like they don't want to block the northbound exit, or maybe they don't want people to stop at the base of the hill in winter. But quite frankly, trying to break down that hill on ice to come to a stop at a stop sign, I think is worse than cars perhaps not getting traction going up it. But that's just speculation on my part. So, but thank you for the information.
Any other questions?
I've got a question about the Hennepin Avenue intersection and how that might play out with the redo, and if there's any chances to really tighten that up, because it's a horrible amount to cross, and it's also missing the crossing legs of Colfax. Is that something you can speak to?
So we're coordinating with the Hennepin project team as for what this will look like with the Hennepin reconstruction effort. We're not quite to that level of detail yet, but I will say this leg of the intersection is getting looked at as part of that project.
And including Colfax, correct?
I'd have to check the limits on that. I would imagine Colfax would be included in that, but I'll need to check to confirm.
Thank you.
Amy, are you looking for a resolution for this?
Yeah, but this is at 30%. So if you guys would like to put together a resolution, that would be great.
Okay, thank you.
I'll throw it on the pot.
Thanks everyone for your time.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you, Amy. Okay, next, we're going to the Bryant Avenue reconstruction with Liz Heyman and Trey Joyner.
Yes, we're here. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome, sweet. So yeah, my name is Trey Joyner. I'm Associate Planner in TPP and Assistant Project Manager for the Bryant Avenue South project. And I'm joined by Liz.
Hi, everyone.
Hey,
So go ahead and
Liz.
kick. So I'll go ahead and kick it off. So the Bryant Avenue South Reconstruction project, we're in our third phase of engagement for the project. We kicked off this project last year in spring with our existing conditions and our project goal setting. And then conducted a series of engagement events across the summer of last year, getting feedback on the priorities of our project goals. And then on into the fall of last year, we had our second open house where we introduced the revised two-way concept, the two-way concept on Bryant, which included the proposal to move transit, relocate transit to Lindale to better meet the project goals along Bryant. You can see here that some of the project goals on the project were to improve pedestrian safety and comfort, created an all ages eligibility facility, support green infrastructure and future transit in the area, and use green infrastructure to collect and treat stormwater runoff. That was a rather new goal that we included on the forefront of this project. It's not something we typically include on reconstruction projects, and then also accommodate business deliveries and customer access. During that first round of engagement over the course of summer of last year, we actually included two other project goals that didn't align, we included two other project goals that came out of stakeholder feedback that didn't align with our project goals, and those were to maintain vehicle access and maintain on-street parking. As you know, along the corridor, Bryan is constrained in some areas. That also stretches out to residences without alleyways or garage access or driveways, and so we know that there are some needs across the street for as far as parking goes. So some of the design considerations that we considered along Bryant during that first phase and second phase were the squeeze-it-in option, which is essentially keeping bikes and transit on Bryant. This is essentially rebuilding the street as it is and doesn't achieve that better balance of those project goals and a better balance of the cross section. The bikes on Bryant and moving transit to Lindale is the option we currently have, and it can be viewed on our project website through a revised two-way design and our draft one-way design. And then the other option we evaluated was our transit on Bryant and our relocation of a bicycle facility to an adjacent street. That option right there, the relocation of a bicycle facility to an adjacent street, we evaluated what it would look like on Aldrich or Colfax. Through the evaluation, we found out that there was just a lot of parking move that would have to occur on those adjacent streets. And to, again, meet those project goals and the stakeholder feedback that we had received thus far, we opted with the bikes on Bryant option. But one of the things that really came out of our second phase of engagement through community feedback was a strong desire to an alternative option on Bryant that wasn't the two-way design. And that's how we came out with our draft one-way proposal that is on our website today. And that one-way proposal still included the relocation of transit to Lindale, but included more green space and a wider bicycle facility along Bryant. And so this image right here is just some of our project goals and the metrics we use to evaluate them, all the options that I just discussed. And as you can see, the bikeway on Bryant and the one-way for vehicles better met a majority of our project goals and the two other stakeholder priorities that we incorporated throughout phase one of engagement. Liz, you want to talk about this one?
Sure. So if you guys have been following along since the last time we were here, we came out with that two-way. In our current round now, we have two options for Bryant. So our adjusted two-way, so it's a two-way for vehicles, and then the other option is a one-way street for cars. And we're proposing the one-way based in direct response to our two main concerns that we heard from folks about the original proposal that we came out with in December. So the first concern was concerns about pedestrian and bicyclist conflicts on the shared use path. So on the two-way, there was a section south of 40th where we were proposing shared space for pedestrians and bicycles so we could max out our boulevard space in that area. Under the one-way, we are able to separate out. You can see this picture here down kind of in the rightish hand corner. We can separate out for the full corridor space for bicyclists and pedestrians. So you can see an example of what that looks like here. And then the other main concern we heard was about parking availability at business nodes. So the one-way does allow us to add back in and maintain more on-street parking in those highly used areas. The other one thing that the one-way does is allows us to add more green space to the corridor, specifically in areas where we really need it to treat stormwater. So we've done an initial evaluation looking at our opportunity areas for green infrastructure, and under the one-way we are able to carve out more space for boulevard space, for plantings, for future green infrastructure within that one-way design. Of course, there's a trade-off. There's going to be likely increased traffic on the adjacent local streets. So that's on Kings Highway, Colfax, and Aldridge. For removing that travel lane, we do expect that in the busiest time of this in this corridor, so that's the evening rush hour, we expect there to be an additional 20 to 35 vehicles traveling along each of those streets. So, a modest increase, something you may, if you live there, if you're in the area on those side streets, something you may notice, but, a modest increase to what's out there today. We also expect there to be some very minimal spillover onto Lyndale, so about 65 to 100 additional cars in the peak hour. But given that Lyndale carries 10,000 to 14,000 cars per day, that's really not going to be something that folks are going to notice. I think those are the high points, given that we don't have a ton of time. So I guess I'd open it up for questions. We do have a ton of materials online. We've got, 2.5 miles of concepts for both Bryant and Lyndale. There is an open survey right now where you can, give us your feedback on the concepts. There's a presentation, all kinds of stuff. But I'll stop there and we can just open it up and take questions.
Hi, I'm wondering if there's any modeling that could be done to understand how traffic speed would be affected by choosing a one-way versus a two-way option.
Modeling on Bryant itself in terms of speeds?
Yeah.
Yeah, so probably not existing modeling that we would look to do, but what we'd really look at is some of our other one-way streets that are much more similar to what this design looks like. So we've definitely heard concerns from people about one-ways and speeding, but I think the examples that people are kind of thinking of, so the Blaisdells, the Park and Portlands, are just really, really wide streets. This design is much closer to a parkway design, where, we have these like really constrained, narrowed up areas in the middle where we're adding in the chicanes. We're elongating those on some of the streets where we know we don't have very high parking usage. We've got, a very narrow entrance at each of these blocks. So just a lot of traffic calming designs that we know work well in our parkways that we're including here. So no, not modeling per se, but we'd look to existing designs that work well within the city.
Thank you.
I'm super curious about, sorry.
Go ahead, Julia, that's fine.
I'm super curious about what you mentioned about diverting vehicle traffic from this street onto others. And I'm just wondering, like, if you've looked at what the air quality impacts would be, what the air quality is currently. It's interesting to me that 20 to 35 vehicles is seen as noticeable for a side street, but 65 to 100 and all the health implications of that is negligible for everyone who lives along Lyndale. And I guess I'm hoping that we see our city using the full street network to, rather than forcing pollution onto our highest density residential corridors. And if there's any insight or additional work that you've done on that you could share with the PAC, I'd be very interested.
Nope, we haven't done those types of emissions. I'd say that generally, if we're expecting today that there's 3,000 to 2,000 vehicles per day on Bryant, that, approximately half of those would be diverted to go somewhere else. I mean, potentially they would, end up on Lindale. Potentially people would be using, a different mode of travel to make some of these trips is also another option. But no, we have not done any modeling on emissions.
And I'll just note too that, going with a one-way design gets us a bigger boulevards and more ability to treat stormwater. And so while it doesn't speak to air quality, you are getting benefits to the environment, or at least stormwater treatment along Bryant for the relocation of those trips.
I'm totally sold on it. I'm just curious, it seems like what we often hear from designers is we cannot consider side streets as part of the network when we're looking at vehicle volumes, and it comes at, so pedestrian safety on, and this may be more county engineers than the city. Pedestrian safety comes at the expense of, like, heaven forbid, we put vehicles on side streets that are running parallel. So seeing you do this, I'm just really, I really appreciate it and hope that this is what we see more of.
Peter, you had a question?
Oh, right. On the one-way design, two lanes of vehicle traffic going in the same direction. I was much more heartened about chicanes, about what they might mean for a two-way street like Grand Avenue. What other calming methods? And I don't think the parkway, the parkway, in my experience, is a pedestrian, that saying that city parkways are great, are ones that work for people out walking. I don't agree with that. But so anyway, so do you anticipate more traffic calming, more positive effects on slowing cars down if within the one-way design?
I guess I'm not totally following the question. So are you saying, are we looking at more traffic calming with the one-way versus the two-way?
That's what I was asking. I made it hard. So yeah, but yeah, exactly. Two lanes going one direction, more faster vehicles versus one lane going each direction. So a car coming the other way is a slowing. Will slow a traffic. Will have some calming effect on a car going the other way. So yes, so that was my question. What if any additional calming methods are incorporated in a one-way design?
Sure. I think the biggest one is that we have these really long stretches of very narrow areas in the places where we know we have speeding issues today. So the places where we have speeding issues today are, pretty much south of, I'll say like 43rd or 46th. I have to pull my existing conditions, but it's really where we know the parking isn't getting used. So it's where we have that really wide open space. So throughout this whole project, we're right sizing parking. I mean, we're removing 50% of the parking in the one-way proposal, and almost a little less than 70%, I believe, in the proposed two-way. And so by just having those really long, narrow sections and those really narrow entrances when people come into an intersection is the way that we're looking to mitigate speeds on the one-way.
All right, thanks, Liz.
Barb, I think you're on mute.
Thanks. Sorry. My question is the two-way, is it southbound? So all the one-way would be southbound, all southbound traffic? Or is it?
Good question. I should have hit on that. I forgot about that in my spiel. Can you Trey, can you go back to that, the overhead graphic, so we're actually proposing a converging one-way. And what that means is that we're looking at a southbound one-way from Lake to 46th, and then a northbound section from 50th to 46th. Couple of reasons why we're looking at that. One, at the outset, we did our traffic modeling and tried to see like which way people are typically going, if there'd be more spillover with one versus the other. And it was kind of 6 of one, half dozen of another. Didn't really matter if we were looking north or south. So then we start looking at land use context and what we need to do to serve the existing land uses in this corridor. And really the big one for this big chunk of southbound that we're proposing is Clara Barton School. Trey, can you go to the next slide for me? Thanks. So it's, you know, in the background, but if you think about a school bus, it's only got one door on one side. We wanted to make sure that when your, you know, buses are accessing Clara Barton, that they're able to keep that door on the same side of the school. So that was a really big driver. The other driver was an existing traffic pattern down at 50th and Bryant, where there is an existing one-way pair on Aldridge, actually, between 49th and 50th. And that's to help with cut through traffic and speeding for people trying to get around the, you know, some congestion at 50th and Lyndale. So we're trying to avoid having two adjacent one-ways right next to each other. But then the other reason is that at this intersection at 50th and Bryant, for people visiting the area by their car, being able to access the parking on the block between 49th and 50th. So they'd be able to, you know, if you're accessing a regional destination, you're coming on the regional system from 50th, and you'd be able to turn north onto Bryant to get to some of that parking. So those are kind of some of the big drivers behind the converging one-way proposal. Other thing to note is that actually, you know, people are really making short trips on Bryant. So only 4% of trips on Bryant are actually going end to end, the way that like people use Lyndale for. What we saw on Bryant is that people kind of, you know, cut over on 46. So they cut out on 43rd and they go to a specific destination, and then they only go a couple blocks and then they leave Bryant. So it's not like we're seeing, you know, really long trips happening on Bryant. So that was kind of another reason why we thought this proposal would work, because it wouldn't be, you know, disrupting too many trips in that way with this type of design.
What is the lane width? Is it 10 or 11 feet? What are you proposing for the one-way, the two lanes?
So it ranges, hold on a second, sorry, Trey, I can't see that for some reason. It's too, let me scroll in here.
It's really little.
Oh yeah, I'm scrolling in. Yeah, I got you.
Okay, cool.
Oh, uh-oh.
Oh, big.
So that's the two-way. So at the narrowest section, it's a 14-foot lane, which is inclusive of 2-foot gutter on either side. And then when we're looking, there's when it's adjacent to a parking lane, it's a 12-foot through lane, but that again, for you guys in the know, it's a 10+2. So it's a 10-foot through lane with a 2+ 2-foot gutter pan. And then when it goes down to parking on two sides, goes to 10 feet through 10-foot through lane if we have two parking lanes on either side.
Okay. And you're going to be coming back. You're at 15%. Will you be coming back, Liz?
So this is 15. We're getting really close. We are planning on coming back with a final 30%. Yes.
Okay. And that's when you'd like a resolution at the 30%?
I mean, actually, I think it'd be probably more helpful now, frankly,
okay.
if you guys wanted to weigh in on the one-way versus the two-way, and then just kind of the overall idea to move transit to Lyndale, because we also have, you know, a whole bunch of information on that. If people are interested, check out online. But that is a huge piece of this as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other questions?
And just for Liz and Trey, I think the committee would plan on having that resolution ready for the full committee meeting coming up.
Yep.
So we'll get that to you.
Okay, great.
Awesome.
Thanks, Matthew. Okay.
Thank you, Liz.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
Trey.
Yeah, thanks, Trey. Thanks, Trey. Thanks, Liz.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
You too. Okay, last but not least is the Upper Harbor Terminal on 33rd Avenue at 15% with Alexander Cato from Minneapolis Public Works and Sierra and Chris from Design.
Hey everyone, Alexander Cato here. Can I get a thumbs up if you can hear me clearly?
Yep, we can hear you.
Great, awesome. So first of all, thank you all so much for having us here today, and just for, you know, all the work you all do to ensure that the designs the city puts forth are bicycle and pedestrian friendly. I have Ciara and Chris from Tool Design on the call with me as well. We'll be talking about this design as briefly as we can and then opening it up for feedback from you all. This is a bit unique. We came to the larger committee at 10% with just very preliminary concepts. At that time, we showed you Dowling Avenue North, the Parkway, and a very preliminary concept for 33rd Avenue North. We're coming back to you all now because we're in a bit of a unique situation in terms of how we accommodate multimodal access on 33rd Avenue North. The design or the map here shows the entire infrastructure for Upper Harbor. 33rd is that southern point, pretty close to the Lowry Avenue Bridge, and will be the secondary access into the Upper Harbor terminal site, and obviously will be multimodal. Dowling Avenue is to the north, and then the Parkway you can see kind of carries along the river. So we'll be coming back to you for 30% for all of this later on this summer, probably in the August timeframe, potentially July. But like I said, want to just dive into 33rd right now and get your feedback on the two options that we have. It's not as much a vote per se, but just we'd like to get some feedback on these different options and see how the Pedestrian Advisory Committee feels about the multimodal access points. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the first option. When we showed the previous option to you all, the shared use path was on the south side. We've since moved that to the north. And the reasoning behind that is that there's a lot of truck activity, specifically at GAF, which is on the south side. You can see Chris's mouse hovering over it. There's, upwards of 100 trucks going in and out of this area every day. And so we decided to shift the shared use path to the north side. We have in here two 11-foot travel lanes with a 6-foot shoulder, and then also 4 parking spots as well. The intention behind the parking was to provide some business parking. As it is today, the entire southwest side of the corridor is parking, so we're taking away quite a bit of that parking, but not all of it. We still want to be honest, accommodate some of that business parking for that business to be able to continue their operations. We're adding a 6-foot shoulder to provide some level of staging and movement for the truck operation, specifically Libra, which is just a little bit north. Chris, if you want to just, yep, Libra's right there. They have about 25 trucks a day. So they're doing a lot of in and out movements as well. So the roadway design accommodates that. We also in here have a 6-foot sidewalk as well. And this carries to the east across the tracks and continues into a roundabout design as well, which goes into the Upper Harbor Terminal site. The real crux of this design, and you'll see how it differs in the second design, is we have a sidewalk on the south. It's going past this, GAF facility, which has a lot of truck activity. And the real crux, to be honest is, do we feel safe having pedestrians travel along this portion of the roadway, knowing the amount of truck activity that is occurring? If you want to move to the second option, Chris.
There you go.
Chris,
That's the second
move
one.
to the second.
Yep. What's up? This is
Okay.
option B.
Oh, I'm sorry. Or the first one. There we go. Without the sidewalk. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So in this option, we removed the sidewalk to the south, expanded the boulevard on the north, so there's a bit of a green buffer, and left the sidewalk for a future development as an alternative option. And so there's really two options. One, we keep the sidewalk in. Two, we take the sidewalk out. From a city policy perspective, there is some flexibility. Section 3.2 of the street design guide talks about the inclusion of sidewalks and says sidewalks should generally be included on both sides of any newly constructed street. Streets that may require sidewalks on only one side of the street include a street with a severe topographic constraint that makes installing a sidewalk prohibitively challenging. The southern side does have a berm in place that does add a lot of grading challenges with the sidewalk. So that there is some flexibility. I think generally city policy likes sidewalks on two sides of the streets. We have that as an option, and really just want your feedback on that. I will transition it now to Chris and Ciara to provide a bit more of the details of these designs as they were heavily involved in that.
All right, thank you, Alexander. Just a few more details to point out, which are on both. So Chris, just go ahead and keep this up. You may wonder, why does the shared use path squiggle so much? There are active rail lines in this area, and so that is intended to square up the crossing across the railroad tracks and then provide a more direct path to the roundabout. I want to mention too, in option A, I think you'll see a 14-foot wide path, and option B, it's 10. It's not like we have to say, oh, we can't do a 14-foot wide path. There's just some considerations with the active rail crossing arms because they do kick out when they go down. And so with the wider shared use path, there is kind of a jog that may not be as intuitive for navigating, especially if people have vision impairments. So it's kind of a notch in the shared use path. Then if we go further to the east, I wanted to point out that the crossings of the shared use path and the are raised. There will be a lot of truck traffic, again, using this roundabout to access the private development within the Upper Harbor Terminal site. And as Alexander mentioned, GAF has some loading docks and access points that are along that roundabout as well. So wanted to point out some of those design details. And then Chris, if you can pan to the west one more time. I wanted to also point out there are topography challenges with the north side as well. There is a very steep grade change. In fact, there is a retaining wall at Libro there. And so although the right-of-way line is in one place, we really can't build that out without easements from the property owners or additional right-of-way. So by all means, we can definitely create the complete street with a shared use path and a sidewalk on the south side, both of which are back of curb. If we do look at an option to accommodate that sidewalk on the south side through redevelopment, then we can have a larger boulevard along the shared use path, if Chris wouldn't mind going to option, yeah, there. And then the future sidewalk itself, instead of being on the back of curb, could have a boulevard as well. So with that, we'd love to hear your questions, comments, concerns, what have you, with these two designs.
I've got some pretty major concerns about the fact that we're even seeing something proposing a sidewalk gap in 2021. And especially for 100 trucks a day, like that's, I just am really, I mean, city policy is really clear that we provide walking infrastructure. Complete streets is clear. Transportation action plan is clear. And it's bizarre to me, as somebody who walks along things that have terrible slopes. I'm curious if you can share with us more about the slope, but the volume of vehicles that pedestrians encounter along any given block appears never to have previously been a concern in the city of Minneapolis, and to use it to justify the absence of a sidewalk is, I'm having trouble wrapping my head around it.
Yeah, Chris, if you wouldn't mind panning to the east. I just wanted to mention, so it's actually 150 trucks per day, and it's not just that it's trucks going down the street. They actually are maneuvering their trucks forwards and backwards across where the sidewalk would be. So between the railroad tracks and the roundabouts, yes. So that is a picture of some of the truck turning movements of the activities that happen there. But, you know, by all means, city policy doesn't say don't put a sidewalk in because of truck activity. That exception is really for the slopes, which are on the west side of the tracks.
Could we see the slopes? Because I have a
Can you describe
when I think of a severe slope, okay. I think that's not what that sentence meant in the guide, and it's not like the sidewalk is prohibited. It's the choices that we're choosing. So like there's room for the sidewalk with other trade-offs. So I'm concerned about using that sentence in that way, but.
Yeah, the implication with the slope here is that we would need additional right of way to make this happen. You can imagine if we widen out the road here, we'd be eating into the side of this hill. There'd need to be some kind of retaining wall here or additional right of way to grade that out. That's the implication with putting the sidewalk there.
And then, Chris, could you show it? It may be deceiving. It looks like it's very flat, what you can see on the other side, the north side of the street. But over by Libra, you can see it's a very
Drops off.
yeah, it drops off behind that fence because then they
describe it?
access their trucks there.
I'm only able to see the slides that have been shared. So can you describe what you're showing?
Yeah.
Or let me know which slide I should be going to.
That's okay. So when we're looking at what slide is this? Slide 3. On the south side of the roadway, on the bottom part of the roadway, behind the walk, there is a grass berm. And it looks entirely flat in plan view, but it's actually a little bit of a rise. So the idea here is if we were to build a walk here, we'd be eating into that berm a little bit, and we need perhaps a retaining wall along the right-of-way line, or we need additional right-of-way to make that happen. And then on the north side,
what is the barrier? I mean, that sounds relatively minuscule when I've been looking at the Hennepin project downtown, and the amount of infrastructure and engineering this meeting that goes into city projects seems like a retaining wall is like child's play. Like you send out your interns to do retaining walls. Is there something I'm missing that beyond what you described that makes it particularly complex?
no, I don't think so. I mean, it's a matter of cost, essentially, and right-of-way impacts potentially.
And typically the city tries to avoid retaining walls because it just greatly magnifies the cost of a project. So that's a pretty standard approach we have to any roadway design for that matter.
Okay, but I mean, having cars on a road greatly magnifies the cost of a project. Pedestrian infrastructure, we don't wear out roads or sidewalks even. So, sorry, Barb, you should probably cut me off. I'm apparently having a lot of thoughts on this, and I don't want to keep other people from speaking, but this seems like a small cost given that pedestrian infrastructure can last hundreds of years, and making it so people can travel easily without vehicles is key to reducing our infrastructure costs. And I'm muting myself now, but thank you for continuing to explain.
Barb, I think you're muted again.
I try to do that. Are there other questions or comments?
I guess yeah, to be sure at the driveways, Libra and GAF, that they're shown for the professional drivers, that's pedestrian space, that it doesn't blend into the parking lot as much as it does to this. It shows clearly that it's a sidewalk and trail and path.
That is a really good comment, and that's going to be something that's really important, especially if the sidewalk is built on the south side, because as you notice right now, this is just a giant sea of pavement. I think it's going to be super critical that if this walk goes in on the south side, that we do exactly that, somehow differentiate it and also provide a detectable edge so someone with a vision disability can know where that walk is and it doesn't just vanish into the giant parking lot they have here. It's going to be super important. Agree completely.
Christopher and Aaron?
Yes, this is just sort of a general comment, and I don't know how helpful it will be. I recognize that this is a challenging situation with the trains and the trucks, but just for me personally, I wouldn't walk there. I think it's too dangerous as described. I am including both the sidewalk gap, the jogs necessary for the train tracks. I don't know what kind of if you're going to use those chutes that make people look left and right, and what kind of markings and signing. I just think it's not there yet. I like if this was to be built, I don't think I'd walk there.
Yeah, that's a good comment. I can provide a little bit of detail on the accommodations for the railroad crossings. You can kind of see here on the north side, based on MnDOT guidance, we will actually have crossing arms gates for the shared use path So every single track will have a set of gates for the shared use path. I'm showing it in here. It's a little bit hard to see. We're not planning any pedestrian mazes or, you know, those little chutes that you described to get around here. On the south side, the walk would not have separate gates, but it would have roadway gates for the roadway that would, you know, descend over the sidewalk. So that's kind of how everything would line up for the railroad crossing signals. And again, our goal here is to square up all these crossings as best as possible for folks biking and folks, other wheeled users, so that they don't fall into the flangeway gap. That's something we're trying to accommodate, especially with the shared use path over here. With the sidewalk on the south side for this last crossing, it's very hard to do. We don't have a lot of room to work with. But for the shared use path, we're getting that on the north side.
Thank you.
Aaron?
Yeah, my question was about the potential right-of-way impact if you were to, you know, accommodate a south sidewalk with by removing some of the right-of-way, which is like how much traffic is actually going through this area, and would it be a major hindrance to travel if, you know, vehicles had to take turns in places? You know, we do that in a lot of roadways where there's parking on both sides. Would that actually be a major problem?
So I guess I'm just trying to clarify the question. Are you saying could we, you know, narrow the roadway more and
Yeah.
not okay.
Essentially proposing a yield street. Would that be correct?
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be pretty challenging when there's, you know, multiple trucks at the same time occupying the roadway. It's not really the through traffic. It's not, the volume on this street is low. You know, there's right now it's really just used as an industrial facility, and even with the Upper Harbor Terminal site being developed, you know, most of the residential uses are to the north of the Upper Harbor Terminal site near Dowling Avenue. The southern portions of the site are for light industrial, so there's going to be trucks there as well. But there's a lot of trucks turning in and out of Libra. The southern warehouse facility directly below Libra has a lot of trucks turning in and out, as well as GAF. You know, over 100 plus trucks a day in and out of those facilities. So it's more so the turning movements of the trucks that are the real challenge here, and the reality of. Or go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the turning truck movements are a major challenge. That just the simple width that the trucks need when they're pulling in and out of all these accesses. And the other thing I'd point out too is we're kind of sort of doing this a little bit already. The idea with this 6-foot shoulder is that as trucks are waiting here to pull in, this is a spot for them to wait. And since we're only providing 6 feet, the expectation is they will extend into the through lane to some extent, and it will function in that regard a little bit while trucks are queuing here. So we're doing a little bit of that already. What we have beyond that is what we need for turning movements and things like that, getting in and out of these different driveways.
Could it be a one-way? I mean, we just saw that with Bryant, and it seems like complete streets is very, very clear that people who are outside of cars matter, and that, like, I get there's people who walk to work here. Christopher, I understand, you know, it is, this kind of space is hostile, though I have trouble imagining being more hostile than walking along Hennepin Avenue and the number of people going across curb cuts. But is there a way, what can we do that's creative thinking that still holds to our city policies around complete streets and around the transportation action plan?
Yeah, that's a really good idea. I mean, long term, that could be a possibility. I brought up the phasing of this. Phase 2, this piece right here, there's no timeline for this. We don't know when this is going to be built.
I'm not seeing the.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm on slide 2 of the
okay,
PDF.
thank you. Sorry about
that. If I can add, it right now, Julia, when it's built, it is a dead end, if you will. It's only one way in and out, 33rd. And then long term, 33rd is going to connect to the parkway, and the parkway prohibits trucks. And so trucks will need to get in and out on 33rd. Having said that, if someday all those industrial users go away and we can do more things with that street when the land uses change, that might be a thing.
Or change vehicle sizes. I mean, we managed to do industry without 18-wheelers for a long time. I guess I'm a little concerned that we're treating that as sacrosanct, and we're not treating the need for mode share shift within the transportation action plan. Anything looking at the urgency of our climate emergency as equally important as a single business and the cost of a retaining wall. And it at least for my part, I can't see the PAC supporting something that goes against the policies that we've spent so much time and so much effort working to make sure that people who walk and use wheelchairs to get around are prioritized. Like if the policies we've worked on in our other subcommittee, if those words have no meaning, then it's hard to figure out where we're putting our time and attention.
Barbie, you're muted.
I do just want to revisit the question of, are folks on this call, feeling okay about the southern sidewalk, knowing that it's going past all those large vehicles? To me, that's a critical question. Are we feeling a lot of safety concerns with that?
Compared to my hands up, I know it's 6 o'clock. Compared to where else in the city? I know that I'm walking along a straight with a lot of professional drivers. I feel safer in general. That I know if they at least have some incentive not to run over me or run over a bike, or they face consequences. Anytime anything happens, their day is very ruined. Anyway, so yes. So the answer to your question is, I do not have the kind of safety concerns along the stretch that I would have elsewhere. I had my hand up for one other comment, and that is to say, we've been looking at the stretch leaving the Upper Harbor Terminal, but the project itself, as I understand it, is designed to be a 7-day-a-week workspace, retail space, restaurant space, not just amphitheater concerts on the weekends or in the summer. Since it's going to be a 24/7 destination, we really need to err on the side of really welcoming people who are not driving into every route we can, into every access point that we can. And that includes taking right away and all that stuff. I don't think that's a big trade-off.
And I think in order to do that, then the walkway that you have on the south side, the design challenge will be to make sure that it's safe for all level of walkers, including people that are unsighted, so that there's markers or tactile differentiations when they come to driveways that let them know this is a change in the environment. I think we have to have sidewalks for people, and we have to work really hard to make sure that those are as safe as they can possibly be, whether it's signage or the other things that people have talked about.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think that's going to be absolutely critical if that sidewalk goes in on the south side, making sure it's detectable.
Yeah. And I think it's important that it does go in. We need to have places for people to walk. So that's just my comment. Anyone else have their hand up, or anyone else wanting to have comments about this? You're wanting feedback from us now. Are you wanting a resolution, or are you wanting to wait until the 30%? What's your idea?
I'm not completely sure just yet. I think I'd like to just kind of talk offline with Matthew about what makes the most sense and follow back up. We will be coming back in July, August with 30% concepts. But I'll follow up with Matthew on does it make sense to have a resolution? But we do thank you all for your input.
Sure.
And through this, we understand these are challenging options, and your feedback is valuable, and we thank you for that.
I I would feel more comfortable passing a resolution just since we've even, like, there seems to be a couple of projects where we've been presented options that don't fall within city policy. And I understand you may not need one, but I would feel more comfortable as the PAC to just make that we're setting what our line in the sand is, because it's been a hard fight to even get to the point where we tried to default to sidewalks. And this isn't about the project planners in this case. I understand that there's different pressures on you, but just from our side, that would be important to me. And I do have a question for the project planners about if we get a chance to go to this site, do you have certain times? This is one that, from what you're bringing up, I would like to maybe go and explore it a little bit. Is there a certain time of day that has the highest volume of trucks so I can really try to pay attention to what your constraints are? Or anything I should look out for beyond what you've described so far?
I think generally high truck activity probably starts around 8 a.m. and is pretty consistent up until 3 or 4 p.m. in the day. So I would say anytime between 8 to 4 p.m. is probably pretty normal and high truck activity volume.
Okay.
Monday through Friday.
Perfect. Barbara,
It's
Aaron, do you want me to draft something?
I couldn't hear you, Julia.
Since I would like us to have a resolution, given sort of the broader implications, is that something you would like me to draft?
So I always have an outline, and I'll email that to the executive committee, and we'll just you can make suggestions as you see fit, as long as we don't have a quorum on any email chain.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Aaron. All right. Thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. I guess with being 7 minutes, that's pretty amazing. I didn't think we'd done.
Yeah, good work.
Okay. Good job, everybody.
Nice work. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.